I am standing in the center of a grand ballroom in Buckhead, Georgia, surrounded by the scent of $500 a plate catering and the hum of high society gossip. But the only thing I can hear is the sound of my heart shattering against my ribs. The crystal chandeliers overhead are sparkling, casting a golden glow on the 150 elite guests we've invited. But all I see is the cold, calculated smirk on my daughter-in-law Brianna's face as she grips my wife's silk sleeve. Eleanor, my wife of 40 years, looks smaller than I've ever seen her, her eyes darting toward the floor as a heavy, suffocating silence falls over the room. My brain is doing that thing where it processes information in the wrong order. First, I notice that Eleanor's diamond earring is trembling. Then I notice that Brianna is holding a cracked plastic container of 2-day-old cold lasagna. The main table is for people who actually contribute to this family's image, Eleanor. Brianna's voice cuts through the air like broken glass, loud enough for every lawyer and CEO in the room to hear. I've cleared a spot for you in the kitchen. The help is already eating, so you'll have company. Go on now, eat your leftovers where you won't be in the way. I watch as Brianna literally shoves the container into Eleanor's hands, a violent movement that nearly causes Eleanor to lose her footing. I wait for my son Julian to step in. I wait for him to be the man I raised, to grab his wife's arm and tell her she's crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. Instead, I watch Julian take a sip of his vintage Cabernet, adjust his designer tuxedo, and whisper something into Brianna's ear that makes her throw her head back and laugh. It isn't an embarrassed laugh. It's the genuine, cruel laugh of someone who knows they have total control. The guests, people I've done business with for decades, are staring, their faces a blur of pity and shock, but no one moves to help. I see the red mark forming on Eleanor's wrist where Brianna gripped her too hard, and the way Eleanor's lip quivers as she turns toward the swinging double doors of the kitchen, clutching that pathetic plastic box like a shield. That is when the cold thing settles into my chest. Not just anger, but a profound, icy clarity. I am Nathaniel, a man who built an empire from nothing so my family would never want for anything, and I have just realized that I have been funding the very people who think they can treat my wife like a servant in a house I paid for. As Eleanor disappears behind those kitchen doors, I don't follow her immediately. I stand there for 10 seconds, staring at Julian and Brianna, and I realize the dessert won't be the only thing served tonight. I push through the swinging doors, the sudden hiss of industrial dishwashers and the smell of grease hitting me like a physical blow. There she is, my Eleanor, a woman who has hosted ambassadors and donated millions to charity, sitting on a metal stool in the corner of a cramped, humid prep kitchen. She's holding that plastic container, her fingers trembling so violently that the fork clatters against the side. She isn't even eating. She's just staring at a pile of cold, congealed pasta like it's her entire world now. Eleanor, I say, my voice sounding like it's coming from miles away. She looks up, and the shame in her eyes is enough to make me want to burn the entire building down. Nathaniel, I didn't want to cause a scene. Brianna said the seating was tight. I don't want to ruin Julian's night. We're leaving, I tell her. I don't ask. I take the container from her hands and set it on the counter with a controlled thud. I take her hand, her skin feels like ice, and I lead her out the back exit. I can't walk back through that ballroom. I can't look at Julian's face again without losing my soul. The walk to the valet is a blur. The humid air clings to us, heavy and suffocating. My black Mercedes pulls up, the engine a low purr. I help her into the seat, gently closing the door before rounding to the driver's side. As we pull out of the estate's long, winding driveway, the silence in the car is heavier than the darkness outside. I grip the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turn white, the leather creaking under the pressure. We're halfway back to our home when the first sob breaks. It's followed by a flood. Eleanor collapses into herself, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with the weight of 40 years of dignity being stripped away. "Why, Nathaniel?" she whispers. "I've only ever tried to love them. I helped her. Why does she hate me?" I don't answer, not because I don't have words, but because the truth is too ugly to say out loud yet. I just reach over and cover her hand, my eyes fixed on the road, my mind already drafting the end of Brianna's comfortable little world that I built for her with my very own 2 hands. I sit in my mahogany-paneled office, the only light coming from the glowing screen of my laptop. Down the hall, I can still hear the faint, rhythmic sound of Eleanor's uneven breathing as she finally drifts into a fitful sleep. My heart is still hammering, but my mind is cold. The kind of detective cold that comes when you're looking at a crime scene. And make no mistake, what happened tonight at that gala was a crime of the spirit. I pull up the family trust folder, a digital ledger of 7 years of misplaced generosity. People in Buckhead look at Julian and Brianna and see the it couple, the successful young executive and his socialite wife living in a $1.2 million colonial estate with manicured lawns and a white pillared porch. They see the 2024 Range Rover Brianna drives to her Pilates classes and the Porsche Julian takes to the golf course. What they don't see is the invisible tether connecting every single one of those luxuries directly to my bank account. It started 7 years ago, right after their wedding. Julian was a bright kid, but the corporate world in Atlanta is cutthroat. He wanted to give Brianna the world, and Brianna demanded it. They came to me, hats in hand, talking about investment opportunities and getting a foothold in the right neighborhood. I wanted my son to stand on his own, but I also wanted him to have the head start I never had. So, I cut the first check. $300,000 for the down payment on that Buckhead mansion. I told Julian it was a loan, but we both knew the truth. I never asked for a cent back, but the down payment was just the crack in the dam. Within 6 months, the maintenance costs of $1 million home started drowning them. Instead of moving to something smaller, Julian called me, sounding small and defeated. "Dad, the property taxes are more than my monthly salary. Brianna is stressed. She says we can't host the partners if the house looks like this." So I stepped in again. I set up an automatic monthly transfer of $8,500 to cover the mortgage and taxes directly to the bank. Julian thanked me with tears in his eyes, promising it was just until he got his senior VP promotion. That was 5 years ago. He got the promotion, but the checks never stopped. Then there was Brianna's boutique. She wanted to be a business owner, to have her own name on a storefront in the high-end districts. I funded the lease, I paid for the inventory. I covered the payroll for 3 employees for 3 years while the shop bled money every single month. Brianna didn't care about the profit margins. She cared about the Instagram photos of her standing in the doorway holding a glass of champagne. When the shop finally folded, I swallowed the $200,000 loss so Julian wouldn't have to file for bankruptcy. I scroll through the credit card statements I still subsidize. $5,000 a month for lifestyle expenses, country club memberships, designer gala tickets, like the one she used tonight to humiliate my wife, and high-end catering. Over the last 7 years, the total is staggering. $317,000 in direct subsidies, not including the house or the business. I have literally bought the air Brianna breathes. I have paid for the very shoes she used to pace around that ballroom while telling my wife she belonged in the kitchen. The irony is a bitter pill to swallow. Brianna treats Eleanor like a paid servant because Eleanor is humble, because she doesn't wear her wealth like armor. Brianna thinks she's the queen of the Buckhead social scene, but she's playing house in a palace built on my sweat. She looks down on Eleanor's outdated clothes and traditional ways, never realizing that Eleanor is the reason I kept the money flowing. Eleanor always advocated for them. "Nathaniel, they're young," she'd say. "Let's help them build their dream." Well, tonight that dream became a nightmare. Brianna forgot who owns the foundation of her life. She forgot that in the world of high finance and property law, signatures matter more than social standing. Julian walked out of that kitchen tonight and chose his wife's cruelty over his mother's dignity, likely because he's terrified of losing the lifestyle I provide. He's become a hostage to the very comfort I gave him. I look at the clock. It's 1 a.m. I open a new document and start typing a name I haven't called in years. Thomas Sterling, the most aggressive real estate and estate attorney in the state of Georgia. As I type, I feel a strange sense of relief. For 7 years, I've been a silent benefactor. Tonight I become a very loud landlord. I'm not just cutting them off, I'm taking back the keys to the kingdom. The clock on my desk ticks with a rhythmic, mocking precision. 2:15 a.m. The house is silent, but my mind is a storm of legal clauses and financial ledgers. I reach for the heavy leather binder at the bottom of my desk drawer, the one labeled Property Assets Buckhead. Most people think that when you give your son a house, it's a simple gift. But I spent 30 years as a corporate negotiator. I don't do anything without a safety net. I flip to Section 14, Paragraph C of the lease-to-own agreement Julian and Brianna signed 6 years ago. It's a conduct and moral clause. It states in cold black ink that the lessor, me, reserves the right to terminate the agreement with 30 days' notice if the lessees engage in conduct that brings gross disrepute or emotional harm to the lessor's immediate family. Shoving my wife into a kitchen to eat scraps while guests laugh. That isn't just a family spat. In the eyes of this contract, it's a breach of the highest order. I pick up my phone and dial a number I know by heart. Thomas Sterling doesn't just answer his phone at 2:20 in the morning for anyone, but I am the client who kept his firm in business during the 2008 crash. Nathaniel? Thomas's voice is thick with sleep, but sharpens the second he hears my tone. Is Eleanor okay? Did something happen? Something happened, Thomas, I say, and my voice sounds like it's reflecting off ice. I need you to draft a formal termination of lease and an eviction notice for the Buckhead property. Effective immediately, 30 days to vacate. There is a long, deafening silence on the other end. Nathaniel, that's your son's home. Julian and Brianna have lived there for years. What happened? What happened is that I realized I've been subsidizing a monster, I reply. I tell him about the gala. I tell him about the cold lasagna, the kitchen floor, and the red marks on Eleanor's wrist. I tell him about Julian's laugh. As I speak, I can hear the sound of Thomas's keyboard clicking. The sleepiness is gone. He's in lion mode now. I'm invoking the moral clause, Thomas. I have a ballroom full of witnesses, including the Prescotts and the CEOs of half the firms Julian wants to impress. I want the papers ready by 8 a.m. I'm not just stopping the mortgage payments, I'm revoking the car leases and the corporate boutique grant I signed for Brianna. I want a total financial blackout. It's going to be a bloodbath, Thomas warns. Julian will fight this. Brianna will go to the press. Let them, I say. They can tell the press why they think a 60-year-old woman belongs in a kitchen like a servant. Thomas, I've spent 7 years being a father. Tonight, I'm just a landlord who's had enough. Before we hang up, Thomas asks one more thing. Are you sure there's no going back from this, Nat? I look at the framed photo on my desk of Eleanor and me on our 30th anniversary. She's smiling, her eyes bright with life, the life Brianna tried to dim tonight. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I say. I hang up and feel a strange, hollow peace. In the morning, the world will change for my son. He thinks he's a powerful man because he wears an expensive suit I paid for. He's about to find out that the suit, the car, and the roof over his head all have my name on the title. By the way, if you're finding this story as intense as I am, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories like this one coming your way, and you won't want to miss how this one ends. I stand up, walk to the printer, and watch the first draft of the notice slide out. The paper is warm. It's 3 a.m., and the countdown to Brianna's eviction has officially begun. I pull the Mercedes back into the long, winding driveway of the estate. The party is still in full swing. From the outside, it looks like a scene from a movie. Warm light spilling from the massive windows, the silhouettes of Buckhead's elite moving gracefully behind the glass, and the faint, rhythmic pulse of music. To anyone else, it's a celebration. To me, it's a house of cards, and I am the wind. I walk through the front entrance, my hand gripping the thick manila envelope. My heart isn't racing anymore. It's steady, rhythmic, almost cold. The valet looks surprised to see me back so soon, but I don't give him a second glance. I head straight for the ballroom. I find them at the main table, right where I left them. Brianna is leaning back in her chair, a glass of crystal-clear gin in her hand, laughing at something the mayor's wife just said. Julian is next to her, looking slightly more animated now that his difficult mother is out of sight. They look like they own the world. They look like they've already forgotten Eleanor ever existed. The servers are just beginning to clear the main course. The clinking of silverware and the low hum of 100 conversations fill the room. I don't wait for an opening. I walk directly to the head of the table. Julian sees me first, and the color drains from his face in an instant. "Dad, you're back? Where's Mom?" he asks, his voice cracking slightly. Brianna turns, her eyes narrowing. The smirk is back, that same condescending look she gave Eleanor when she handed her the leftovers. "Nathaniel, I thought you two had retired for the evening. Did Eleanor forget her shawl in the kitchen?" The table goes quiet. People nearby stop talking, sensing the shift in the air. I don't look at Julian. I keep my eyes fixed on Brianna. "The dessert hasn't been served yet, has it, Brianna?" I ask. My voice is quiet, but in the sudden silence of the table, it carries like a gunshot. "No, not yet," she says, her tone flippant. "Why?" "Good. because I brought you something better. I reach out and place the manila envelope directly onto her gold-rimmed dinner plate, right on top of the remains of her expensive steak. Consider this your final course. Brianna looks at the envelope, then at me, then at the guests who are now staring openly. She scoffs, a sharp, ugly sound. What is this? A check? Finally decided to fund that summer house in the Hamptons? Open it, I say. She sighs, rolling her eyes as if I'm being a bore, and tears the seal. Julian leans in, his brow furrowed. As Brianna pulls out the first page, the one with the bold red stamp at the top, the silence at our table spreads to the tables around us. I watch her eyes scan the page. I watch them stop on the words, notice to quit, and eviction. I watch the smirk literally slide off her face, replaced by a pale, sickly mask of confusion. What is this? She whispers, her voice no longer loud or confident. This is a joke, right? Nathaniel, this says I have 30 days to vacate the premises. It says you and Julian have 30 days to vacate, I correct her. And it's no joke. It's a formal termination of your lease-to-own agreement. I've invoked the moral clause you both signed. Your conduct tonight was a gross breach of the terms of this household. Julian stands up so fast his chair screeches against the floor. Dad, you can't do this. This is our home. In front of everyone? Are you insane? No, Julian, I say, turning my gaze to him for the first time. I was insane for 7 years while I paid the mortgage on a house where my wife is treated like a servant. I was insane while I subsidized a life for 2 people who don't know the meaning of the word respect. Brianna finds her voice again, but it's shrill now, desperate. You can't evict us. We've lived here for 6 years. We have status. You're going to look like a monster for doing this to your own son. I lean down, resting my hands on the table, putting my face inches from hers. Status is something you earn, Brianna. You thought you bought it with my money, but as of 8 a.m. tomorrow, your car lease is revoked, your business grant is terminated, and this house is officially back on the market. I look around the room at the elite of Buckhead. Enjoy the rest of the evening, everyone. The dessert is coming, but I'm afraid the hosts will be a little too busy packing to enjoy it. I turn and walk away. I don't look back to see Brianna's face as she realizes the manila envelope is the last thing I will ever give her. I don't look back to see Julian's silent plea. I just walk out into the cool Georgia night, feeling the weight of the last 7 years finally lift off my shoulders. The drive back to our actual home was different from the one we took an hour ago. The first time we left the Gala, the car was filled with Eleanor's quiet, broken sobs. This time it was filled with the frantic, electronic scream of my phone. It was Julian. Again, and again, and again. I didn't answer. I reached over, took Eleanor's hand, and felt the faint tremor in her fingers finally beginning to fade, replaced by a heavy, exhausted stillness. We pulled into our driveway, our home sitting dark and dignified, a stark contrast to the glittering nest of vipers we had just left behind in Buckhead. As soon as we walked through the front door, I set my phone on the kitchen island. It lit up immediately, the screen glowing like a warning signal. A text from Julian flashed. Dad, pick up. This isn't funny. Brianna is hysterical. You can't legally do this. We need to talk now. I looked at Eleanor. Go upstairs, honey, I said gently. Take a warm bath. Try to get some rest. I'll be up in a minute. She nodded, her eyes still clouded with that hollow look of someone who had been told they didn't matter by the person they loved most. As soon as her footsteps faded down the hallway, I picked up the phone. I didn't call Julian back yet. First, I opened my banking app. I hit confirm on the 3 stop payment orders I'd drafted on the ride home. The $8,500 monthly mortgage transfer? Voided. The $1,200 insurance premium for Brianna's Range Rover? Canceled. The $2,000 lifestyle allowance I sent to Julian's personal account? Terminated. Then the phone rang again. This time I answered. Dad! Finally! Julian's voice was high-pitched, vibrating with a panic I hadn't heard since he was a child. What the hell was that? You humiliated us in front of the Prescotts, in front of my boss. Do you have any idea what you've done? Everyone is whispering, the party is ruined. I know exactly what I've done, Julian, I said, my voice as steady as a stone. I've stopped paying for the privilege of watching my wife be treated like garbage in a house I bought for you. It was a mistake, Dad. Brianna was stressed. The Gala is a huge deal for her social standing. She didn't mean anything by it. She was just trying to keep the seating chart organized, and she was just in the way. She told your mother she belonged with the help, Julian. She shoved a container of cold leftovers into her hands and pushed her toward the kitchen. Was that part of the image you're so worried about? In the background, I could hear Brianna. She wasn't crying. She was screaming, her voice a shrill, ugly sound that stripped away all her high society pretenses. Tell him he's a senile old fool. Tell him I'll sue him for every dime. That's my house. He signed it over. He can't just throw us out on the street. You hear that, Julian? I asked. That's the voice of the woman you chose over your mother tonight. She's not worried about Eleanor's heart. She's worried about the house. She's worried about her status. And for the record, Brianna, you might want to reread that lease agreement. The moral clause is very specific. Dad, please. Julian's tone shifted to a desperate plea. The bank already sent an automated alert. The mortgage payment failed. If we don't fix this by tomorrow morning, the default process starts. We'll lose everything. Our credit will be ruined. We have nowhere else to go. Then I suggest you find a way to pay it on your own, I replied. Or find a smaller apartment you can actually afford on your salary. Because as of 5 minutes ago, my bank is closed to you. Permanently. You chose your side at that dinner table, Julian. Now you get to live with the person you chose. I hung up before he could say another word. I didn't block him. I wanted him to see the notifications as each service I provided slowly went dark. I walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street, knowing that by morning, the it couple of Buckhead would finally have to learn what it means to actually earn the life they've been flaunting. Now, before I tell you what happened when the sun rose on Monday morning and the legal reality hit Brianna like a freight train, I have to ask you something. If you had spent 7 years of your hard-earned life building a dream for your son, only to watch his wife treat your own wife like a common servant in the very home you paid for, what would you do? Would you keep writing the checks to keep the peace, or would you draw a line in the sand that no one could cross? Tell me in the comments below. The sun rose over Buckhead on Monday morning with a deceptive calm. I was sitting on the back porch watching the mist rise off our small pond, clutching a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Inside, Eleanor was moving through the house with a ghost-like silence. She hadn't asked me to reconsider. She hadn't asked about the legal papers. She just looked at me once during breakfast, her eyes still rimmed with red, and touched my hand. It was the only permission I needed. By 10 a.m., the storm hit. My phone didn't just ring. It exploded with a barrage of texts and voicemails that painted a very different picture of the woman I had been funding for 7 years. Brianna's true colors didn't just come out. They bled through every message. It started with a text that read like a legal threat. Nathaniel, you are making a grave mistake. You've been showing signs of confusion lately. We have witnesses who say you were acting erratically at the gala. If you don't withdraw that notice by noon, we will be forced to take legal action regarding your mental competency. I felt a cold laugh bubble up in my throat. I've seen this pattern before in my business life. When a person is cornered, they don't apologize. They attack the person holding the mirror. I ignored the text. 5 minutes later, Julian called. He didn't sound like my son. He sounded like a man who was reading from a script written by a frantic, angry woman. Dad, you need to listen to me, Julian began, his voice thin and desperate. Brianna she's not herself. But what you did, handing those papers to her in front of everyone, that was assault in her mind. She's already talking to the neighbors. She's told the Buckhead Country Club board that Mom had a medical episode and that she was only trying to protect her by moving her to the kitchen. Is that what she's calling it now, Julian? A medical episode? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I have 15 people, including Thomas Sterling and the Prescotts, who saw her shove your mother and hand her a box of leftovers. Are they all part of this confusion too? She says you're twisting things because you want control of the house back, Julian shouted, and for the first time I heard the genuine fear in his voice. Dad, she's saying that if we lose the house, she's leaving me. She's taking the kids to her parents in Texas. She's telling everyone that Mom is the one who's been abusive, that she's been manipulative for years. People are starting to believe her, Dad. The neighborhood Facebook group is already buzzing. They're calling you a financial bully. This was the escalation I expected. In our circle, reputation is everything. Brianna knew that. She was trying to weaponize the very society she claimed to belong to. But what she didn't know was that I had spent 30 years in the corporate trenches of Atlanta. I didn't make moves without receipts. I stood up and walked to my office, Julian still rambling on the other end about reputation management and family peace. I pulled up the security footage from the Gala's valet area, the part where Brianna had followed us out and screamed, "I hope you choke on your dignity, you old bat," while Eleanor sat trembling in the car. I also had the signed statement from the head server who had witnessed the shove in the kitchen. "Julian," I cut him off, "tell Brianna that she can post on every Facebook group in Georgia. She can call every board member at the club. But every time she tells a lie, I will release one piece of evidence. I have the video, I have the witnesses, and more importantly, I have the title to the car she's driving and the house she's currently packing her bags in." The silence on the other end was absolute. I could almost hear Julian's heart sinking. "Dad, please. She's my wife," he whispered. "And Eleanor is my wife, Julian," I replied, my voice as hard as a diamond. "You spent 7 years letting Brianna edit your mother out of your life. You let her crop her out of photos, you let her sit her at the back tables, and you let her mock her accent when she thought I wasn't listening. Tonight was just the moment the mask fell off. I'm not managing this anymore. The 30 days are still ticking." By that afternoon, the true extent of the damage was clear. My daughter Diane called me from her home in Denver. She had seen Brianna's posts. She had heard the rumors. But unlike Julian, Diane had seen the marks on Mom's wrist. "Dad," Diane said, her voice shaking with rage, "I'm coming home. I saw what Brianna posted. She's trying to say Mom is demented so she can challenge the trust. It's disgusting. I told Julian if he stays with her after this, he's dead to me too." The family was fractured, just like the blue porcelain in those stories of old. But as I watched Eleanor finally step out into the garden that evening, a small, weary smile on her face as she looked at her roses, I knew the cost was worth it. Brianna thought her power came from her social standing and the mansion she lived in. She was about to find out that when you build your life on someone else's mercy, you should at least have the decency to be kind. The battle wasn't over. Brianna was still fighting, still trying to find a loophole in the lease, still trying to alienate Julian from us. But the more she fought, the more her true colors stained everything she touched. She wasn't fighting for her family. She was fighting for her furniture. And that made all the difference. By the way, if you're finding this escalation as intense as I am, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's much more to this story, and you won't want to miss the final resolution. The 30th day didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived with the low, grinding gears of a yellow moving truck backing into the driveway of the estate I had spent 3 decades of my life paying for. I sat in my car across the street watching. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there because I needed to see the physical end of the era where I funded my own family's disrespect. Eleanor was at home. She didn't want to see her son's life packed into cardboard boxes. But I knew that if I didn't witness this, the boundary I'd drawn might eventually soften, and it couldn't afford to soften. Brianna was on the front lawn, and even from 50 yards away, her voice was a sharp, grating staccato. She was screaming at the movers, her high society mask completely shattered. She was wearing yoga pants and an old hoodie. The designer gowns were likely already packed away in a desperate attempt to salvage her image. Without the backdrop of my mansion and the hum of my money, the it girl of Buckhead looked small, frantic, and fundamentally ugly. Julian stood near the front door, leaning against a white pillar. He looked like a man waiting for a storm to pass, unaware that the storm was only just beginning. When the last of the furniture was loaded, Julian walked toward my car. He stopped by the driver's side window, and for the first time in years, I saw my son. Not the executive I'd manufactured, but the boy I'd raised. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, echoing defeat. I rolled down the window. "We're moving into a 2-bedroom in Sandy Springs, Dad," he said, his voice flat. "It's near the highway. It's all the salary from my actual job covers. No more subsidies, no more lifestyle bonuses." "It's a home you can afford, Julian," I said. "That's a start." "Brianna is filing for divorce," he continued, looking back at the truck where his wife was still berating a worker. "She told me this morning that she didn't sign up for a life in a shoebox. She called me a failure because I couldn't control you. She says you're a monster for doing this to your own blood." "And what do you think?" I asked, looking him dead in the eye. Julian looked at the house, the palace I'd bought him, and then at his hands. "I think I let her turn me into a coward. I think I watched her treat Mom like garbage for years because I was too afraid to lose the cars in the country club. And the irony is I lost it all anyway. I lost the house, I'm losing the wife I thought I loved, and I've nearly lost you. I reached out and put a hand on his arm. The door to our home is open for you, Julian, but only for you. Not for the cruelty you allowed, and certainly not for her. You have to rebuild your life on your own terms now. No trust funds, no safety nets, just the man you decide to be. He nodded, a single tear tracking through the dust on his face, and walked away. I watched the Range Rover, the one I'd let him keep as a final gesture of mercy, pull out of the driveway for the last time. The mansion was empty. The for sale sign in the yard was the final period at the end of a very long, very expensive sentence. The aftermath was brutal. The grandchildren were the hardest part. For the first year, Brianna used them as weapons, telling Liam and Chloe that Grandpa was a mean man who took their playroom away. It was a knife to the heart, but Eleanor and I stood firm. We sent gifts. We kept their college funds in a trust Brianna couldn't touch. Eventually, as Julian settled into his new, humbler life, the kids realized who was actually showing up for them. Julian lived in that apartment for 2 years. He learned to pay his own bills. He learned that respect isn't something you buy with a subsidized mortgage. Brianna moved on to her next target, chasing a lifestyle she never earned. But the choice I made that night at the gala changed the trajectory of our lives. It cost us a year of silence, a mansion, and a social standing I never really cared for anyway. But it saved my son's soul, and it protected the dignity of the woman who has been my world for 40 years. I'd do it all again. It's been over a year since that Buckhead mansion went back on the market. People still ask me if I regret being so ruthless, or if a serving dish was worth the fracture in my family. I just look at Eleanor gardening in the sun with a smile that isn't forced, and I know the answer. I didn't just evict a daughter-in-law, I evicted the poison from our lives. Money can build a palace, but it can't buy a drop of character. I chose my wife, and I'd do it again every single day. Subscribe for more stories.